This is Auteur Detour, wherein three film lovers travel through the filmographies of cinema's most important directors in hopes of finding a greater understanding on the other side.
Hey everybody, welcome back to Auteur Detour. This is Travis today with Ian.
Hi.
And Chris.
Hello, film friends.
Oh yeah,
film friends. I was going to say it too, damn it.
All right, today we're here to talk about Y Tu Mama Tambien. Y Tu Mama Tambien is the story of two teenage boys who convince a sexy older woman to accompany them on a road trip to a secret beach called Heaven's Mouth, which they made up. It is a movie with a classic teen road comedy plot. The boys hope to drink, do drugs, and get laid before their scheme unravels. It's also a movie where the plot often becomes nearly irrelevant when an omniscient narrator contrasts the on-screen frivolity with the social reality of Mexico at the turn of the millennium. With richly drawn characters, impeccable documentary-like shot composition, and a trio of sublimely realized performances, Y Tu Mama Tambien is a highlight of early 2000s world cinema. So says Travis. What do you guys think?
Chris, do you want to go first?
Yeah, so this is the last Cuaron film I actually had not seen before. So this was the first time taking it in. I know, amazing, right? So I'm going to be perfectly honest. The first maybe 30 minutes, I was like, I don't know about this movie. You know, it felt like almost like, okay, it's going to be one of those, like you just said, like one of those, you know, road sex teen comedy type movies, knowing literally nothing about it. Again, I went in as blind as completely possible somehow. After like whatever 20 years of it existing, not knowing what it's about. And honestly, it really grew on me. The first couple, there's a few really interesting moments, especially some cinematically. I was like, ooh, this is really good. This is really good. I actually rewound this movie more than any other film we've watched yet so far. And it really picked up.
So that means you've seen it almost enough times, because I think you have to see this movie twice.
Yeah, I I reviewed it many times actually, because it's just shot so uniquely, and you can really see where Lubezki's really coming into it with his camera. He tries a lot of really new stuff that we hadn't seen before in this movie, and it really grew on me. After about the first 30 minutes, I kind of got into the flow of it in terms of where the direction it was heading and the style of filmmaking. So in the end, this was an amazing movie. I was just sat there after it was over and went, okay, kind of let it hit me. A lot of movies I'll just turn off after it's done, like, okay, fine. This one I kind of had to sit with it, and then I reviewed it again in my head to the point where I was like, wait a minute, oh yeah, that Harold and Maude picture in the beginning, I didn't even notice it, but then, you know, when you're reviewing stuff, a lot of the themes come back around. So solid movie. I'm really glad I got to see it. I'm amazed I hadn't actually seen this prior to this, but I'm really glad I did.
I know, world cinema lover like you. I just want to poke in like, oh wait, I forgot what I was going to say. Go ahead, Ian.
I fucking don't even know how the words to say how much I love this movie. I feel like Travis after he saw Little Princess when he was 12 or whatever. So I saw this movie when it came out, and we talked about it a little bit in our first episode because we were just going through Cuaron. And I was, you know, we were young. We were 20 when it came out in America in 2002.
19.
So,
and
what came out in, whatever.
Yeah, something
right in there. And I think I thought about this a lot, like with certain movies, that I was too young or maybe too stupid, whatever I was. I just didn't relate to the characters a lot, but I definitely was not, I don't know, wise enough to see the director and writer judgment of them in a weird way, you know? I kind of was mildly jealous of them, and also mildly just related to them as an age in a weird way, and I couldn't see them from a worldly perspective. This time, that's not to say I didn't love it. I thought that it was great. It was right up my alley for being a 20-year-old watching a sex travel movie, you know? And it was directed beautifully, obviously, but I didn't understand so much about it that I feel like I understood this time. Watching it this time with the, grace of 20 years on the characters and with the knowledge of what happens. Again, it's weird that I haven't rewatched it, but I just never had. I watched it this time and I was it weirdly brought me back to a level of loving movies that I haven't felt in so long, that I felt on, like, my nerves were buzzing the whole fucking movie. Like, I was so into it. It's gonna be hard to top. I'm gonna say it. It's gonna be hard to top this one. For me going through this series.
I was really shocked at how good it was. Yeah, me too.
It really moved me.
I thought it was like basically the best movie I've ever seen in my life. I was blown away. I mean, by the time like she like does that dance where she's like staring into the camera, I'm like, I'm like, this is the best movie I've ever seen in my life. That said, I don't feel like I need to rewatch it anytime soon. Like, the sex scenes are so uncomfortable that like it was not like a joy for me to like take in a lot of that stuff. In fact, I really appreciated this. This is my second viewing, Ian, and I'd love to hear more about why you think that's so necessary to watch it multiple times. But like opening with the sex scene and like forcing you to like kind of deal with that right up front, kind of like also it kind of helps you accept
solo contemporánea though.
Yeah, but it helps you accept like you're going to be seeing a lot of sex. And if they had waited like 10, 15 minutes to like shock you with that, it would have like kind of taken you out of the movie maybe, or it would have been too big a shock to kind of like get back into it. You know what I mean? But you kind of like set your tolerance level like very, very high going in. So then the rest of the movie you can kind of just deal with like as a voyeur and not get too freaked out. So I appreciated that, filmmaking choice a lot.
This movie.
So why do you think it?
Oh no! Please go ahead. I think you asked.
Ian, I just want to know why multiple viewings is a requirement for Y Tu Mamá Tambien.
I mean, first of all, the reveal at the end. We'll just get right into the spoiler that like she, was dying the whole time, and I want to just go ahead and right now throw it to Ebert's review, because he wrote this really great review of this movie that I was gonna just kind of say the same thing that he was going to say in it, but
what a coincidence.
I might as well just give him,
stop leaning on Ebert.
Yeah, Ebert needs a little push, but he talked about it in this way, which is like, it works on this travel teen movie level,
Yes.
But you always know the whole movie that there's this second sort of more real level that's going on around them as you watch the disparity of class in Mexico sort of play out around them. But then it gets to the end and there's this reveal that there's actually an even bigger dark realism that's happening, where through all of the class stuff and through all the teen sex stuff, she's got a month to live and she knows that, and she's witnessing it all and sort of like trying to figure out like what she could take from this life and what she could leave from this life. And like, you don't know that when you're watching it the first time, obviously, so that's the main reason.
Well,
I think
they kind of give you a hint that that's, she goes to the doctor, gets some bad news. I mean, they kind of lay that down.
I mean, they lay it there and you can get the clues from it. But like, for me, like, obviously I knew that watching it this time from the beginning. Every moment of her performance was so much more pronounced, knowing that was like, that she had died and that they had never seen each other again after that, like trip, and like just the whole ending sort of, I don't know.
Well, I'll just throw in really quickly to what you're saying, like, watching the movie at age 20, I completely these are not characters that like I like see myself in like a lot, but I completely thought I felt like it was their story. Watching it now closer to 40, I watched it as if it was her story. And I don't know that that's necessarily like watching it a second time or just watching it at different times in my life. But I did feel strongly about that. Chris, what were you going to say?
Oh yeah, I was going to say, it's not quite the same topic, but it feels like this is a cinematic reset almost for Cuaron and his whole crew, really, almost in a way. I said it started off for me kind of tough to take in because I think I had a certain expectation going into it regarding what Cuaron does and how he does things. For example, you said it starts off with a sex scene, which is fine in and of itself, but it's just really like a handheld camera. And I'm like, interesting. Okay, cool. It's kind of documentary feeling. I wonder when we're going to get into the graceful gliding, very well composed. Yeah. And it never does. It's never, I'm like, is this entire film handheld? This is interesting, and I'm waiting, and eventually it establishes itself as such, right? Mm-hmm. And it feels different. It's got this narrative twist to it where the audio's happening and then it just goes silent before the voiceover narration, and that was really initially jarring to me. I don't know why. Oh yeah, me
it's
narration.
Very jarring.
It's supposed to be. It feels like, I don't know that it's supposed to be, but it certainly works and the way that it is.
The narration doesn't
No, yeah, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Travis. What?
It doesn't. There's like
cut line.
This is like Zoom. This is like Zoom conferencing. There's like the audio cuts out and then it just sits at, and it's not quite silence. It's like almost silence. So it feels like something's wrong.
They give you a beat. Yeah,
I feel like I feel like you can hear the audio like at an almost subconscious level still. But when I saw that in theaters, we all thought there was something wrong. And then when the guys started talking, we're like, oh shit. And then like that was like a big moment in the movie. And then you're used to it at that time. Seeing it in the streaming era, every single time it cut out, I was like, oh no, like I'm losing it. Like, you know, so it hit different for sure. So that was unfortunate, I guess. But yeah, it is jarring in a great way. It
reminded me of that. Part of it was the nostalgia that I have for this brief 10-year period of filmmaking from 96 to 2006, which I think is really a magical era. Like, and that includes a lot of this kind of omniscient narrator stuff. Like I'm thinking of, the Royal Tenenbaums has it. This one obviously has it. What's the other big one that's got it? Oh, Amelie has it. There was a bunch of them that also were trying it. Those three do it sort of most memorably to me. But like,
it feels very different than those movies, obviously. But like, I mean, this is a movie.
I just mean the narration of it, like the way that like the narrator sort of pops in, and it's very, it's like it comes from Godard, like sort of did that in Band of Outsiders, and that kind of thing where it's just like somebody will stop in and tell you what's really happening in the scene, kind of thing.
And didn't I read that in Solo con tu pareja, Carlos, Alfonso's brother, and he wrote like detailed backgrounds for every character, and they had these kind of like poetic details and also like details relating to kind of the socioeconomic realities of the world that they lived in. He had written all that stuff for the movie and gave it to the actors as a way to kind of like prepare them for their role and stuff like that. But in this movie, they actually make it part of the movie. So it does seem like it's just sort of like taking all their ideas and stuff that they were, trying to cram into a more traditional Hollywood style in the other movies. In this one, they just go like, let's just do what we want to do. And it feels like the form is following more the function of like the ideas that they had. And you get something that feels a lot more radical. And that contrast between the main story, which does like, you are emotionally involved in that because of the characters. Like they don't just shoot handheld, they shoot like fly on the wall or like in your face, but you're never getting camera. Yeah. You're never getting like there's a scene where she's talking about her husband's infidelities, and it's this sort of like moment where she's like looking down and it's like tender. Any other movie would like show her face in that moment and like let you see that play out. She's acting her ass off in that scene. The camera is like across the room. And it feels totally different. Like you're just like at another table, like hearing this like awkward conversation. And there's this sort of like, so you're emotionally invested, but you're not like with those characters in the way that you would be in like a Hollywood movie. This is a movie that by my count only had like 2 kind of like reverse shot scenes. And they were the most intense scenes in the movie. They only went to reverse shot, like this kind of like boring kind of like way of filming when Tanoke finds out that the other guy slept with his girlfriend. And then another scene that I can't remember at the moment, like near the end, where it finally lets you kind of get in there and just feel like a little bit of like traditional filmmaking kind of stuff and traditional Hollywood filmmaking.
Yeah, like maybe when she's talking to the old lady when she's buying the doll.
Yeah, maybe that is what I'm thinking of. Yeah, but
that's the one that sticks into my head too.
Yeah.
But that was my first note that I wrote as I was watching it, was just the camera never stops moving, swirling around the characters and through the rooms, missing the action. And it makes you feel like you're like at a guest at a party, like, walking through a party and like witnessing this sort of weird actions that are happening around you. And it's like that in every scene of the movie, it's really incredible.
Or even literally, like you said, Travis, like a fly on the wall. For example, there's the scene in which they pick up Luisa for the first time from her apartment, and it's in her apartment, and she leaves the apartment. The camera remains in the apartment and moves slowly toward the window, and you see her greeting them outside, like we're out, like sitting in her, like literally like a fly that was hanging out in her apartment that's watching them depart together. And that was really, really interestingly done. Same the scene right before it, I think, where they're on the phone, or I think Julio's on the phone, and it shows him in the bathroom. He's peeing in the right-hand side of the screen, and the camera just kind of keeps moving past the bathroom, and it just kind of lingers and shows you around the apartment while the narration kicks in. I'm like, this is brilliant. This is so engaging. I've never seen him do this before, you know?
It's when they show the photos like in the house and you get like this real feeling like this is a real human being. This is a 3-dimensional human being. They're way more than just like the emotion that they're having in that moment, like the way that like a classical Hollywood editing style would kind of like involve you like at a specific level. This is going for something very different. And it's not just the kind of camera that's like doing, again, like classical editing style just without the cuts. You know what I mean? It's completely avoiding that and going for something totally different. And there is a contrast in between like the narration and the action in the movie, but the camera is kind of working like with the narration to kind of like create like a bigger scope and like there's all these like incredible background details, like people acting in the windows across the street while you're watching a scene in the foreground. Right before the audio drops out for the first time, you hear this siren in the background. Like it's working on like all levels, just the level of detail in this movie. If the last movie was like Baroque in a kind of like superficial way, in a way that didn't really add to the story, this one feels like every detail is like so perfectly, immaculately constructed to to like add to the effect of the film.
And part of that to me is how much he is. I mean, this is the most boring thing to say, but like how much of it really is a true love letter to Mexico. Like, all of those things that you're talking about, like create this world where, I don't know, I think you've been to Mexico, Chris.
Where?
And Travis, have you ever been to Mexico?
Oh yeah.
I have been to Mexico many times. I love Mexico.
Yeah, I love Mexico too. I've spent, months of my life there. I fucking love it. And this movie really fucking nails it. Like it's just every detail of sense memory that like came back into me. There's a scene where they're in the hotel room and there's the brick hotel and they're in the courtyard and you can hear the bugs chirping and I'm like, that's my Mexico. Like that's what I remember it looking like.
I will be the one to say that they nailed Mexico. And they nailed Mexico. Alfonso Cuaron, you've successfully done it to Travis White's standards.
It's funny you say that, Ian, because this movie came out around 2000, a little after 2000s or so, and they're describing at the end, it's really just a shot of the city moving by as they're right before they're about to talk in the diner at the end, and they're talking about how there's a political party that had been in power and had been unseated after 70 years, and I literally remember being on our spring break in 2000 or 99, right, and in Puerto Vallarta, and I'm riding around in taxis, and all you see is Sebastián Labastida everywhere, who was the new political guy who was the guy in the main party, and every taxi driver I'd talked to was like, who are you going to vote for? And they're like, Vicente Fox. I'm like, who is this guy? Because there was nothing, but everyone was behind this guy. So speaking of like real details in Mexico, this was a humongous deal in Mexico politically at the time, and all of the people, literally every person, like human being I spoke to in Mexico and that time was all about Vicente Fox, or like screw the large conservative party that had been in power for years. So it was just a subtle detail. Yeah. Well, I mean, it was just a subtle detail in the movie, but it's so clear like how culturally embedded in Mexico and Mexican history and lore that this movie really is. Like again, even the details of, like you said, the hotel room where they first kind of like are spying on Luisa. I'm like, I've been in a hotel just like that. Like it feels like that shower. I've been in that before. And one last point about that is that he clearly loves so much of Mexico. Specifically, I got shades of Roma in this with direct, specifically around Mexican nannies. They're not part of the central part of the plot, but his affinity for nannies is so clear. Like you see the scene where this nanny feeds Tenoch, I think, a little sandwich or something right before they go out on the trip. And there's like a certain couple scenes in which they meet a few random characters just passing by, and the camera just lingers on these ladies, like a group of ladies, for a little bit longer than a typical a film probably would. And you can just see how much he loves his people. Specifically, he loves this old style, old world Mexico with like the real people, the real women, the real nannies specifically seems to be something that his camera really hones in on. And I really love that.
It's so funny that he like masterfully and beautifully tells this story about like love and class and stuff like that right after he made Great Expectations. Where there's so many levels to this movie and so many incredible details. And the last movie was just like, again, this kind of like knockoff kind of Romeo and Juliet style, like pop literature, like bullshit that was so sad. And this, it's, you know, I just want to say, like, this movie feels like, you know, Chris, you said it's sort of like a reset for him. In some ways, you know, it's hard to say this because he's an artist who's always evolving and always kind of like working towards something or changing. But this, in some ways, feels like the first Alfonso Cuaron movie. We're halfway through his filmography, and it's like, okay, this is like his. And like I said, I think, you know, his first movie like laid the ground for a lot of this stuff. Little Princess, I think thematically kind of goes with this movie really strongly, but it doesn't stylistically, obviously, it's extremely different. But I think this movie like is a realization of something that is uniquely his.
I wonder how much credit Carlos should get in this, because I feel like, you know, part of the thing with Great Expectations is just the script was bad, you know, and like in Alfonso Cuarón movies, his scripts aren't necessarily his highlight of his movies. You know, this one, Children of Men and Roma maybe being the exceptions to that. But even like, you know, Gravity, like we'll talk about it. Like I loved Gravity when I saw it, and I probably will again. But I remember like my least favorite parts of it were some of the script choices. And and I don't know, I just feel like Carlos writing this one with him like probably added a lot, because I wonder how much of it was just because it was written so tightly. And so I was going to say, when you were talking about how you watched it when you were 20 and you had it as their story, now you watch it as, you know, part of that to me, and this is a feeling I had while I was watching it, was every character really feels like they're only living their experience of the movie. Not just because Tenoch and Julio don't know about what's going on with Luisa, but also because like they don't really seem to want to reckon with like their own relationship with each other. Like they're only coming at it from their experience of it. And that's really hard to do in a script, is to like completely separate these three movies that are happening at the same time and have them work so perfectly together. And every character is played to fucking such incredible performances of like, no, you don't doubt for a second that every one of them would make every choice that they're making out of ignorance, out of jealousy, out of like horniness, out of like, you know, all of it. It's just so fucking perfect. Like, I don't know. That was my thought about that.
Well, totally. To your point about Carlos, I'm sorry, really briefly. To your point about Carlos, at the very end, if you notice, there's it ends. The first title card is the three characters in a triangle, and then the next title card is at the top, Carlos Cuaron, then Lubeski, then so his actual Carlos is listed at the top as far as his writing, you know, is concerned, which is kind of interesting too, because obviously a lot of the time film ends and immediately the first name you see is the director, right? But it starts off with Carlos at the very top. So obviously it's, again, sort of like I said, resetting. It's like, let's bring this back around. You know, this is
focus on the writing.
Effort. Yeah, exactly. This is a team effort here, and this is like the crew we started with, so to speak. So, yeah, they definitely had a hat off to Carlos there for sure. A
little disappointed in you guys. I thought we were tourists. I don't really talk about screenwriters, so let's move on. No, just kidding. Like it's outrageous, and I think, you know, having it be his brother that he's writing with, I think, you know. I haven't seen Carlos's films that he's made, you know, but like, I think the two of them working together is like an incredible team. And even like Solo con tu pareja, which I did not love, like it was very impressive in a lot of ways, you know, the writing and the directing, obviously. But I just want to say, like, you know, that movie was similar to this one in that there were moments of like very, you know, it's a camera that's more curious than it is like engaged with the characters a lot of the time. One of the big exceptions is when he's like spying on his neighbor, like who's like in like beautiful slow motion and stuff, and she's this like gorgeous woman. This movie, Y tu mamá tambien, it's a very sexual movie, but it's not sexy at all, in my opinion. It's like Betty Boop. It's like, I get that there's a lot of sex, but like I'm not aroused by this.
Agreed. Yeah, I get what you mean by that. I think that the last sex scene, or not even the last sex scene, but when they finally start to sort of dance, and that long 7-minute shot, not the actual 7-minute shot, but how that shot resolves with them sort of like realizing that they're going to have a threesome and like become one. That's kind of a sexy scene to me in a weird way. But it is also, there's so much tied up in it. I just think it's shot so much differently, obviously, than like the initial 2 sex scenes and then the 2 sex scenes between the 2 boys and Luisa.
Mm-hmm.
But like, I know what you mean. I mean, every sex scene in this movie is there to tell a story. Like, you know, we've talked a lot about horny Cuaron, and we've talked a lot about just sex scenes in general in movies. And, you know, I've said it before, like, if a movie is using a sex scene, it better be like advancing the story in some way to me. Like, that's, or it better be like just a sex movie, you know? And like this one, I really feel like so much of what the resolution of the movie and of the just how you frame who these characters are is told through those sex scenes. The way that like the boys are so only interested in their own orgasms and they're only like, you know, and then like the way that they're so jealous of each other the whole time. You know, we haven't talked about it, but like to me, one of the things that really moved me this time that I was just too stupid or too young to understand is just how the biggest theme in this movie is the class disparity between the 2 of them and in Mexico in general. You know, it plays out so sometimes completely without any subtlety. Like when he'll say something like, you know, the narrator comes in and says, Julio lights a match when he's in Tenoch's bathroom and Tenoch lifts the seat with his foot, because it's like clearly they're saying like, oh, Julio wants to hide that he's a poor guy, and like that shits. And Tenoch is like slightly embarrassed by the poor friend that like doesn't have a rich person's bathroom, you know? And it's like sometimes it's told very, like I said, without any subtlety, but every moment of their relationship
colored
you
by
have to see through the filter, but filtered through that. It's so good. I mean, and it comes through in the sex scenes in a weird way too, especially their jealousy at each other. And like, even when they kissed at the end, you know, of the movie, it feels like them finally trying to like get one up on each other. Just like there's no romance in that kiss.
I disagree. But go ahead. Go ahead.
Well, when I was young, I was sort of seeing it as like, you know, we were in the prime of HBO. Like everybody had to be, every show was not, I shouldn't say had to be, because I'm all for it, but like it was the first time that you were allowed to have like gay people kissing on TV. And so every show would have like lots of gay sex and stuff like that, which more power to it. I loved it. But I felt like this was sort of part of that indie gay sort of thing. And I kind of viewed it as that. This time that I watched it, it's not that I didn't see any romance between them. I shouldn't say it that way. It was more just like, these are 2 people who don't know how, I don't know. I guess I haven't really thought of how I'm going to say this, but they love each other clearly, but there's like an undeniable competition between them because one of them is incredibly rich and one of them is poor. And so it just felt like everything that they do was like trying to get on equal terms. And that was that.
That I agree with. I think, I think the story is, you know, they have a dream of living like, you know, doing drugs and like getting laid. And that sounds really like, you know, lame, like, you know, or like just some teenage boy thing. But like, it really is their dream. That's like what they want to do. And they find this older woman, and just by the chance that she has been diagnosed with a deadly disease and has a shitty husband, she takes them up on it. And it's like, they're going to realize their dream. And in the process, like they basically get exactly what they want and they hate it. And it's awful for them. And she is trying to live her dream, which is to travel and to be in the moment and to kind of escape this bourgeois existence that she that she's kind of like fallen into, again, because of like the circumstances of her life, because of money, right? Which ties back to politics. She also wants to escape from her normal life and kind of live like with complete freedom. You know what I mean? And the lesson of this movie, or the story of this movie, you know, maybe lesson is too strong a word, is that it's impossible. You know what I mean? Like she gets maybe closest, right? But like for the two of them, and again, like I really, the first time I saw it, it was really their story. For the two of them, the powers of like class and like their social kind of like training or whatever is too strong for them to kind of live with complete freedom. And I think that moment where they're kissing, I think that is them totally uninhibited and with utter freedom. And like that beautiful moment, like in this house, on this beach, is them living their absolute fantasy, and reality can't sustain that. You know what I mean? Like if they stayed there with her or something like that, or they moved past that and tried to live with that, that is that glimpse of that other world that Little Princess is kind of like all about, right? But I think, but in this movie, it's like they can't move past it. They're going to fall back into their kind of social roles, and everything is kind of predetermined. The narrator tells you they're never going to see each other again. I mean, this like might be his bleakest ending. Like even
oh my god,
even like what's it called? Children of Men. You don't know, like he's in the sea, like you're not sure what's going to happen. This one is just like here's what happens, and it's just like Jesus Christ. I absolutely loved it, but it was tough.
But that feels appropriate in a way. That feels appropriate in a way, especially given the truly like realistic setup of this film. Like no, I mean, I don't know. Was there any music in this movie aside from the like diegetic sound?
It's only soundtrack.
Yeah, and like the jukebox she plays. I mean, this all feels like a real, actual. Again, this dude.
I did love the music in it too, though. The soundtrack was great. I mean, not songs that I ever listened to or would listen to, but like they fit so perfectly in the time of this movie, and I just loved it.
You guys ever seen my two cats together?
I didn't know you
Let's see them
there's
kiss.
two of them. Yeah, I thought it was just the same one, just all over the place.
All right, sorry, go ahead. I have two identical cats, just wanted to point that out.
No, I'm actually glad it ended in the way that it did, because the whole film has this kind of somber, slightly melancholy feel to it, of longing and desire, yet unfulfilled, and it's perfectly appropriate that it ended the way in which it did. Otherwise, it would just be like this another sort of Hollywood, and they, all lived happily ever after, and that absolutely would be a cop out for a film of this emotional power, I think. So it all just fits together just so well, again, once I got into the flow of it, once I got into the, like, I understood where the film was going thematically and how it was going to get there. It all falls into place.
Speaking of amazing details, the Tower Records bag that Tenoch has at the cafe booth, my friend pointed that out kind of after we'd both seen it for the first time, and I was like, oh, I missed that. But this time I was like, oh, that's so perfect. Especially for that moment. And speaking of like how this movie captures that turn of the century moment, like I don't know, I don't speak Spanish, like I know a couple words, but I don't know if the F slur that I was hearing in the or that I was reading on the subtitles is accurately translated. But them saying like, "Oh, we love our gay friend. It's so cool that he's living his life." Anyway, like what's it like? Trigger warning. We should bleep that. But I thought that was like such a perfect encapsulation of like the liberal mind at like the turn of the millennium. You know what I mean? Like. Just slipping between those two kind of mindsets, like without hesitation. Just wanted to say that.
I was just gonna say about what you were saying, Travis, that like about that final kiss, and I really like the way that you summed that up, because even this watch, I was doing some mental math trying to figure out like what that moment was, because I had obviously remembered it from the first time I watched it. It's a very memorable moment. It's a powerful moment.
I didn't remember how long it was. I was like, oh yeah, they kissed or something like that. No, they're like making out.
They're going for it. And but like, I don't know. I just wanted to say, like, good job. Just kidding. But I do like the idea that, like, what you said about the Little Princess, too, of, like, this brief glimpse into sort of their paradise. And it is worth coming back to, because you kind of briefly mentioned it in the intro, that, like, this heaven's mouth, this beast, this fantasy that they've invented, like, they manifest it.
Yes.
Like, it appears before them. Like, that whole sequence is very, like, surreal in that, like, like you said, like they get this brief moment of like, oh, this is what, but it is also, not to sound pessimistic because I don't want to be, but like it does feel more right and sad when you see them at the end and they're like just their class, their different roles in society at this point are so much more clearly defined, and like they've sort of grown up in a weird way, even though it's only been a year, but like they do look older in a weird way, and they look they just look separate,
they look beaten down by life a little bit,
which is weird because that last diner scene was the very first scene they shot, ironically.
I thought that was crazy too.
Crazy.
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
I saw a picture of Alfonso Cuaron in the booth next to him, like an outside shot. I'm like, whoa, look at how young he is. But yeah, apparently that was the very first scene they shot, which is really interesting when you look at an actor and getting into the mind frame of a character. Like you would have had to have lived the whole movie basically in your head and acting it out before any of the other scenes were shot. So I don't know.
Well, part of it works so well because Gael Garcia Bernal and Diego Luna were born together. Like they are literally childhood friends from birth. And, it comes across so much on the screen that like, even to be able to shoot that final scene as the first scene, like it would only work if you have that kind of connection, I feel like, or if you're a really good actor, which they both are. But, you can feel it in, we haven't also talked about this movie is really funny. Like I laughed a lot. Like, as sad as it is, I really thought that like, there's moments like fucking, do you smell bread right at the beginning? That's like, that just captures like that 19-year-old humor thing, but it's played in that same way that like, Travis, I know you just saw the Jackass movie. Like what we love about the Jackass movies is that you're laughing with the characters, you're laughing because they're laughing. And like, it's hard to do that in a movie, but when you see real friendship on screen, the way that you see it in this movie or in the Jackass movies or something, like it's impossible not to laugh when they're laughing because you feel it's there, I don't know. I loved the "do you smell bread" part stuff. Like it's stupid, but it's fucking funny. Like
I'm not surprised you like that, Ian. No, it was like I found it delightful. I didn't really find it like I didn't laugh that much, but I definitely like was like I really did feel like I was like removed from the humor. You know what I mean? I was like watching their humor, and it was like what was engaging about it was like their connection, and their friendship is so like palpable and their closeness is so powerful that you kind of delight in their relationship even if you don't find the actual things they're saying funny, right? But because you're like a mature adult.
That's what I meant by the Jackass thing. Is like I would never laugh at somebody like getting kicked in the balls if it happened in front of me. But when you watch it in that kind of movie, you're like, it's fucking funny because they're laughing and they're friends.
I wish the narrator from this movie was in the Jackass movie and it's like Johnny Knoxville never was able to use his right testicle again. I want that narrator in every movie, just like ruining the movies. But no, like Chris, what you said about of course this movie couldn't have a happy ending, and Ian, what you said, like of course like it seems more real by the end, and when like again just like beaten down by just the smallest taste of like quote unquote real life, right? Little Princess was like the realization of this kind of like this fantasy that she has, this other world that's better, and then in the movie everything works out that way to show you like, oh, it could be this way. The evil people in power could be made to sweep the streets because they're of no use to anyone otherwise, and this movie is like, there is something else that we could achieve, you know what I mean? We could reach for our desires, we could be open about what we want and stuff like that if we could somehow dissolve these class distinctions. But we're not there, obviously. Here's the reality. This like joyful fisherman and his family are going to be forced to like clean luxury hotels. That was the shittiest moment in the movie to me. That was harsh. That was like, I was like, why did you do this to me? Like, I want that narrator ruining more movies though. I would love that. Like the Marvel movies, like that would be great.
He was the star of Solo Contemporáneo. Did you mention that?
Right. You mentioned that like when we watched that movie, which I had no idea. But he's kind of the star of this movie too. Like, I mentioned the 3 central performances, but what that voiceover does in this movie, it reminded me a little bit of, I had seen some Wim Wenders movies and I thought they were interesting. But when I saw the movie Wings of Desire, And the camera is moving with this kind of weird grace through this like goth rock concert, and everyone's just kind of dancing around. And there's this, this incredible mood. This impalpable, is that a word? Like there's this mood that like you can't quite put like your finger on. And then there's these solemn, solitary figures standing outside of everything, watching over it, talking about it. Like to me, that was like such a genius move because it like puts these figures that represent like this, what the camera is doing like on the screen, and being able to see that and feel that like directly, it made the movie like so powerful to me. And to me, that's like kind of that director's like crowning achievement. This movie felt similar in this way that it was like this narrator is doing something to this movie, like for this movie, like completely taking it to another level. I mean, obviously it does take it to a different level, but I mean, it's just such a perfect way to like, along with the camera, I should say, because they really are working in tandem, and they to like just create this like incredible tapestry and this like vision that is like just so unique and so powerful.
It also gives it such a sense of urgency, this type of narration. Like in scenes where nothing is happening on screen, having this sort of low-voiced, almost broadcaster style, narration coming in and being like, you went to this, and you did it. It was like telling you like, and you're just like, oh, like there is more going on under this. Like it makes you feel urgent in these moments that have no urgency in them otherwise,
Speaking of Alfonso Cuaron, incredible touches, the green is almost gone from this movie.
I was wondering when we were going to bring this up.
But when the green comes in, it's very, very powerful. Like if you didn't love green before, just by being like inundated in a world like through a green filter, this movie really makes a case for the beautiful power of green, because he uses it in the most beautiful scenes, and it's the only light that he really uses in like a beautiful way. It's in the party scene. It's in on the beach in the bar at the end, right? It's the pool, the water in the pool. Like it's he really uses it gorgeously, and you really appreciate his love for green, maybe in a way that Great Expectations did not impart.
That was like watching, a guy so far up his own ass with what he was into at that moment, and this was like him just fucking showing you what he's into. Like,
it's like looking at a green piece, like a green piece of paper, or like an emerald.
Before I forget, we didn't ask you, because Travis had said like, the groundwork was laid for her diagnosis at the beginning. Did you pick up on it? Like, were you aware that she was dying, or like, was that seated in your mind while you were watching it?
No, not at all. In fact, that's partly what I meant about getting so much more out of it as I kind of reviewed it after I watched it. I'm watching, one of the hangups, again, when I first started watching, it was like, this doesn't feel real. Like, this feels like wish fulfillment to a degree. Like some horny, like older man writes this story about two young teenage guys with this impossibly hot older lady. I'm like, okay, but it unfolds, and it makes so much more sense in so many ways when you realize not only the diagnosis, but her reactions, especially on the phone, her just being emotionally distraught in certain moments where we're just kind of observing her from afar. It's more than just her breaking up with her husband. She's actually suffering. She's dying, and she's coming to grips with her own mortality. And we're watching this lady's world kind of crumble while she's trying to take on all of this stuff and live her best life, I guess, in this moment. And it just makes so much more sense. So in a sense, I'm kind of glad I didn't pick up on it initially, because again, it enabled me to review the movie after I saw it and see it almost through a brand new lens and appreciate it that much more, and kind of kicking myself for for being so harsh the first pass through. Right. And while we're on it, I didn't realize, again, before I started watching this film, the only person I knew that was in this was Gael Garcia Bernal, right? And then Diego Luna, I'm like, this guy looks familiar. I'm like, oh, wait, this is Diego Luna. Okay, he's not like a, huge factor in my film going world. But then in comes Maribel Verdú. I'm like, Maribel Verdú is in this movie. And I loved her in Pan's Labyrinth. I extra loved her in a movie called Blanca Nieves. I'm not sure if you guys... excellent.
White,
It's like a modern Spanish black and white silent retelling of Snow White. And she's Encarno, but basically the evil stepmother, the evil queen, and she's great in that movie too. And I was like, this lady is amazing. Of course, she shows up on camera and just absolutely crushes it with these with the weight of her despair in certain moments. Like you said, the camera just kind of lingers on her from afar. No cuts. It lets us be with her, and just her emotion as it comes out, because it's often sudden and violent, where she just breaks into like crying, and we just have to sit there and be with her through that. And her performance here is just amazing. I was so glad to see her, and I'm even more glad to see the depth of the performance that she gives.
Absolutely. I just was putting something together, and this is kind of a weird, maybe nothing, but like, I always like to tie filmmakers' like previous work into whatever they're doing now. And the scene where they do come across by her hotel window and see her through there, and she's crying, and she is their mystical sort of fantasy woman, and that's how they see her. It's kind of parallel to the weird anti-version of that in Silicon to Perea.
I was going to actually say that.
Yeah.
Like every time you see her by herself, you know what I mean? It's
Yeah.
not like she's like undressing or something like that. She's literally just crying and dealing with her own
like
shit.
Just because you guys know what I'm saying, but just to get it out, like in Silicon to Perea, every time he passes by his mystical dream woman's window, she's sitting there like lovingly brushing her hair naked, basically, like she's like, shown with almost no inner turmoil or anything that would cause a problem for his character. And then like in this one, they're living in this completely delusional world, and then like they come across her in the window, and she's showing like what's actually happening in her world.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's kind of interesting.
Absolutely. Yeah, I actually was thinking that too. Ian, you mentioned well, let's see, how do I bring this up? I have a couple things. Basically, Chris, that one shot you were talking about where it's watching him pee, and then the camera kind of moves laterally and like looks down this kind of like wall of like different crap and stuff in this house. That shot reminds me a lot of the shot of in Taxi Driver, where the camera is on Travis Bickle making that horrible phone call and then moves into the hallway like out of like embarrassment or whatever.
Yes.
And I was just gonna say, I feel like Martin Scorsese is like a really big influence on Alfonso Cuaron and probably Lubezki too. Like the moving camera that like I think is an influence on everybody that's like after Martin Scorsese. Yeah. But that moment specifically, like I said, the tense scene in Great Expectations where Robert De Niro is like fumbling with the gun. I mean, that whole movie was so boring. And then that one moment had like a really weird kind of energy to me that felt like very Martin Scorsese. And then I didn't even bring this up, but Little Princess, many of the textures and colors and from that movie seem totally lifted from one of my favorite Martin Scorsese movies, The Age of Innocence. Ian, is that what you were going to say or no?
No, I was just going to say that as you were saying that, it was dawning on me about how much Little Princess, the aesthetic of that movie and the sort of textures of that movie feel like Scorsese's kids movies to me. Like when he does make a not like he ever really makes kids movies, but like that more genre, because he makes movies that are in that genre that A Little Princess is in every once in a while. And like,
well, The Age of Innocence had come out just a couple years before. And it uses these incredibly vivid colors, and it uses this kind of like images that are reminiscent of like vintage photography and stuff like that Little Princess totally works within. And I think those two movies are like extremely linked in my mind. Similarly, kind of beautiful movies. And I wouldn't be surprised if that movie was like a primary influence on Little Princess.
Cool.
Yeah.
Anybody got any other final thoughts? I mean, I just fucking loved it. I just, you said you don't know that you'll see it again anytime soon. I watched it by myself, and my first thought was like, I just want to like show somebody else this movie. Like, that's why I wouldn't be so shocked if I do watch it again soon. Like, I don't know. It really was powerful to me.
It was powerful to me too. I just like, you know what I mean? Like, it's so powerful
so
that
sad. It's very sad.
Yeah, it's sad and also like a little shocking and a little kind of like, I do like sex scenes in movies, or I totally appreciate like sensuality in films and beauty in films. It doesn't have to have a purpose for me. These ones did have a purpose, and they were also like slightly uncomfortable. And I like that in the movie, just not something that I'm like, let's throw this on. Right. I want to see some teen ass.
Having put this movie, again, finally seeing this movie now, after having seen all of the rest of Cuaron's films, this makes perfect sense where the rest of his career goes, because it feels like that turning point that he needed. Because prior to this, right, it's got a little bit dicey. I'm like, except Little Princess is good, but again, having watched Great Expectations and then knowing what he has coming up and all the different accolades he's to receive in the future, I was wondering, like, okay, where's the sort of the turning point? Where does it like shift for him, And this is clearly that point. And it's, again, the realization of so many themes, so many different styles and motifs that we're going to be seeing, like, really turned up a notch. I think, well, not necessarily turned up a notch, but also used to accent some of his great films later on, too. So I'm glad I finally got to see this and really situate it contextually within the filmography of Cuaron, because it's like, it's the perfect, again, sort of transition to where he's going to be headed in the future.
And I love that, even though, speaking of his themes and motifs, I love that even in Gael Garcia Bernal's mom's shitty apartment, there's like a big, beautiful window looking out on Mexico City. Like, I was like, had to find that perfect Cuaron apartment view.
Yeah. Wait, do you guys think he fucked his mom?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it's they laugh about it afterward in a way that it's like, is this more of their competitive, like, I'm like, but
you can tell when Gael
too.
Garcia Bernal is lying in this movie, his performance is that nuanced, and he was not lying in that moment. That is my take. I mean,
it also would track that he would fuck his mom based on how he feels in that relationship,
Yeah.
And by his own horniness, you know, like,
exactly.
I think he did too.
Yeah, I think he felt bad about it or weird about it, but it just, I'm basing it 100% not on like the context of the movie, but just on Bernal's
His
performance. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm with you. What great performances. I fucking loved it.
Yeah.
Can we rate these?
Yes.
Are we there?
Yes. You guys go
I'm going to
first.
go first, and I feel like it's unfair to pit A Little Princess against this one because they are so... A Little Princess hits in such a different way to me.
Yeah.
Like, when I watched it this time, it moved me in an incredible way, but it was more of like a... I don't even know how to distinguish the two different ways, but it was a completely separate feeling.
Yeah.
That being said, maybe it's recency bias, maybe it's whatever it is, but I have to put Y Tu Mamá Tambien at the top of my list right now.
That's fine. Yeah.
So much last night.
It's so good.
And then A Little Prince or A Little Princess, right there with it, but I'm going to put it a notch below just for the sake of ranking. And then Silicon to Pareja, miles below, and then miles below that, Great Expectations.
Right. Yeah. Same here. Only I don't love A Little Princess as much as you guys do. You guys really, dig it. I liked it, but Y Tu Mamá Tambien's way up here. It's number one, of course, then followed, of course, by A Little Princess, then Solo con tu pareja, and obviously Great Expectations, just languishing in the doldrums there at the bottom.
That poor movie.
Yeah, it's almost arbitrary because these are two, like, in my opinion, like masterpieces. And with Alfonso Cuaron, there's a level of like appreciating a movie or loving a movie where you can't, it's such a pure like feeling. It kind of reaches like, it's like you hit, like one of those fairground hammer games, and it hits a bell, and it's like, which hit the bell harder? It doesn't really matter once you get to a certain level. It's like, it's just like, it's impossible to kind of say like, oh, I like this a little bit more or something. Little Princess is my favorite, so I'm going to put that at number one.
Yeah.
This is literally one of the best movies I've ever seen in my life. Yeah. I'm going to say number two. Solo con tu pareja kind of sucks. Number three, and Great Expectations, horrible. Bottom of the list. It's easier. I think it's going to be easier to rank these in more like tier systems. You know what I mean? Like a top tier, middle tier.
We know how you do it,
tier.
Travis.
All right. Thank you. You appreciate my ways. All right. Well, I guess that wraps it up.
We're about to record a mini-set where we fucking go to our top 10 movies.
Strike that from the list. Don't spoil. We don't want to spoil that. Mini episodes happen completely by chance. They're not planned. Yeah, we'll see you guys next time when we discuss Harry Potter 3, The Prisoner of Azkaban.
Looking forward to it.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. Bye.
Later, film friends.
Bye, film friends.
Thank you for listening to Auteur Detour. We'll see you again next week.